All right, welcome to this short discussion going over some of the biggest changes for Age of Sigmar 4th edition. For this, we're going to be talking the good, almost all good. I will upfront say I like almost everything they've done, and the one bad thing I think they've done this. Well, okay, two bad things for this edition. The one really isn't a change. So, in our local area, with the new edition coming out, a lot of us have started picking it up, playing. I used to have an army. I ended up getting rid of that. I used to have Cruel Boys. I just wasn't enjoying them. There's actually another video I'll probably see somewhat soon about just when to leave an army or a game, because I want to talk about that. It's something I've also done recently with another system. But with this coming out, a lot of us have either picked up armies, built up armies. You're going to see some videos about the army that I'm working on, but I currently have it all 2,000 points of it sitting off to the side. It's getting primered, I don't know, about an hour from now down in the basement. So I'm going to be working on that over the weekend, seeing how much I can get done on my OCR Bone Reapers. But I thought this would be a good time to talk a little bit about it. Now, this is not going to be an overview of how to play the game or anything like that. If that's what you're looking for, that can be done. There's other people who have done them. We can do them as well. At least for a little bit, some of the content might be a little bit more solo, because I know Steve is very busy with some things that's going on, and Dan just effectively, they just had a second child, so that kind of takes his availabilities, understandably so. But I wanted to do this just to discuss what I like and don't like about the new edition. Just very quick overview of it, though. So, at the time of recording, we are about not quite 2 weeks past the new edition has just popped. I've watched quite a few games, played some small points games. I now have my army put together to play a large point game, so I'm going to get more play in. So some of these are a lot more of the thoughts on what I see rather than what I have used, but from game experience and watching it, these are things that I think are fairly confident are not going to change. All right, so let's get into some of the good and the bad. Let's talk about the first good. First good is the objective size change. So old edition used to be 12 inches. Now it is the standard 40K 40 inch plus a 3 inches off of that. So essentially a bit over 6 inches, a little bit over like 6, really technically a little bit over 7, because yeah, 40 millimeters is a little bit over 1.5 inches. So you're looking at overall about 1.5, 7 inch diameter. Sorry, 7.5 inch diameter for the objectives. It used to be 12. So that is quite a bit of a difference. What I really like about this, and I think some other people pointed this out, one, it's more in line with some of the other games, which is good. I'd rather them just be 6 inches. I hate the fact that it's the 40 off of that, but so be it. That's the way they want to do it. It's the same way they do in 40K. They definitely have, to some extent, 40K'd the game when it comes to like objectives and a few other things. The way they do list building, not exactly the same, but they've altered that greatly from what it used to be. They're trying to get some congruence between the two, I feel. But what's nice about that means is, remember, engagement range in this is 3 inches. So if you're not engaged in combat, you have to be outside of 3 inches, which means if I'm a 40 mil base or bigger, so if I'm looking at some of my stalkers right here, this guy, if he's standing on a base, or sorry, on an objective, if he's right in the middle of the objective, you can't touch it. When it was a 12-inch objective, if I was standing in the middle, you could still be on the objective, and I could have, say, my little unit of 3 of these guys with, their new objective control and all of that. But I could have my unit of 3, and you could still score the objective, because you could still have surrounded me fully if you wanted. And maybe you just have too many models then. It forces engagement, and it lets you avoid the, staying almost a foot away from your opponent to either not get engaged, not be, not able to fight, whatever it may happen to be. But you could actually avoid people in the past. You can't avoid people now. If you want to claim points, you're going to have to actually get in there and get your hands dirty for it. This is effectively a close combat game. It doesn't mean there's not shooting, there's magic, there's spells, all kinds of things like that. But it at its heart, it is much more about probably the close combat, and now they're forcing you to close combat more. You can't play keep away nearly as easily. Even before, what you could have done is you could have screened off part of the objective and had your real scoring unit further back. They hit your screeners, take out your screeners, but then that's multiple turns of you scoring the points. So first thing is that objective size. Second, really nice change that I like is that everything is an ability. So what I mean by this, if you look in the book, it used to be, movement phase, obviously you're allowed to move, you're allowed to run, all these sorts of things. But now they're all abilities. Movement is an ability. Keyworded all at that. Running is one. Shooting, or essentially it's fight, is what they do. And if you're in the shooting phase, you shoot. And if you're in the close combat phase, you do close combat. But everything's an ability. So what this does, one, it means that when they delineate this, one thing we'll notice if you actually look at the book, they delineate it all off of colors, which is helpful. So you can actually tell where things are supposed to be, but everything is nicely color coded. The other nice part about doing it this way is that there's no more confusion as to when I get to do something versus you, because abilities are worded as the active player does their abilities, then their opponent does their abilities, which means when we look at your commands, since commands are abilities, your commands are going to go after I'm done whatever I'm doing. If it's in the movement phase, I'm going to move all my units, I'm going to run my units, anything like that I'm going to do, and then you can do your redeploy. If it's the charge phase, I get to do all of my charges, then you may countercharge. There's no issue with timing, which, from someone who played a bit of third, who also plays 40K, who plays some other games, timing is always something that you want very clearly delineated for people. You don't want there to be up in the air of when something should happen, or when something triggers compared to something else triggering. Is it first in, last out, like some games do, all of that. And they avoid that because they essentially just said, hey, everything's an ability. That also cleans up, I know at least in my army, one of my guys says, hey, you want to do an ability, it's going to cost you some command points for your opponent once per game. Okay, well, I know what their abilities are. Core abilities, okay, that's the moving, shooting, all of that. So they've done a very good job of highlighting what you have, when you have it, and everything like that. Next big thing, combat range. So when I had my Cruel Boys, I made them with spears rather than swords, because swords had a shorter combat range. They were a little bit better in general. I think they were like threes to hit and fours to wound, but they're only 1 inch, which means, and their bases were 32, which for anyone who knows, it's about 2.54 centimeters in 1 inch. So in other words, they are bigger than an inch. That means you're only getting the first row or the first grouping. If you have someone stacked behind you, can't. So I took the spears because spears were 2 inches. But you had this problem of, depending on what you really actually had to decide exactly what you're going to armor everything with. When I was starting to build up some more tech guard, because I did grab them essentially before this new edition. Okay, well, do I put spears or swords because those were different? They had different stats, they had different lengths, all those sort of pieces. Now no, you are armed with a weapon, and your weapon hits 3 inches. Everyone is 3-inch bubble. So 3 inches your engagement range. It's also your range in order to the swing. That means, one, if you are taking some of these bigger reinforced units, if I'm taking a 20 pack of more tech guard, I'm very likely, depending on the way I start them, of course, very likely to be able to get them all to swing. That's needed on some of these bigger units, because often when you have a really big unit where you are hoping to be able to get more combat, it's because you're not great at combat. So you engaged me. I'm going to have to fight you anyway. I want as many of my 20 block that can swing, because each one is not very impressive. When you look at the stalkers, well, there's only 3 of them. Okay, they're going to do good work, and they don't need that 3-inch bubble. Although it does help them as well, because if you have this bigger bubble, that means you can either potentially be getting in from starting further away when you essentially do your consolidation type moves, or it lets you be able to engage other people in combat. Because remember, in this game, when you declare state charge, you just roll the dice and then figure out how far you're going, who do you hit, things like that. That means you can actually pull other people into combat easier than you did in the past, and you can make sure you can reach a lot easier. Anything that standardizes it but doesn't remove what keeps it interesting, I think, is a plus. Everything is a 3-inch range, so you never have to worry about that aspect. But now you have the multiple levels of thought of where exactly do I charge, because I know it's 3 inches. If I charge a bit too much like this, well, then that other unit's bubble, or I'm close enough that they can now countercharge and they'll be able to make it. And those are now the thoughts you have. So it's not less tactical, but it is simpler because now we know what to expect. Next plus. So we've done 1, 2, 3. I think this is the 4th plus, if I'm keeping count right, is army composition. They do it better than 40K. In this particular game, 40K's army composition is have a hero and then, Bob's your uncle, just don't have more than 3 of something. I don't believe that rule exists here. At least I haven't seen a match play. And I don't know if it was ever really much of a concern, but what they do now is, okay, you take a hero. Your hero is the leader of that regiment, and then your hero is allowed to take up to 3 other units. There it is. Actually, I'll say it a little bit more since it's actually there. So you get 1 to 5 regiments. Your regiment is led by a hero. Someone's got to be the general. And in that regiment, you get the 1 hero, and you get 0 to 3 non-hero units, or 0 to 4 if that's your general. So what this does, it forces you a few things. One, it means you actually do have to take characters. This is a characterful game. There's a lot of characters. I know at least in my army, there's almost as many characters or maybe more characters than other units. I think that's true for a lot of other factions in general as well. And your character will tell you what they can take. So in particular in mine, one of our effectively monster units can be taken by most of the characters. Some of them named characters, some of them non-unique, non-named characters. But if I want to take, say, the horses, I need a guy on horse. Infantry guys take my monsters or infantry. Some of my other special named characters are the ones who can take anything. So there's a lot more thought that has to go into list building. You can't just go with whatever you feel like and just throw everything together into a pot like you can, at least to a large extent, in 40K. I know at least me as a player, when I look at some 40K lists, some of them just don't interest me because it doesn't feel like an army. It feels like, a selection of the best things that you could have. Where in this, it feels more like an army. You have someone who's leading a small contingent, and they're all brought together by whoever the general is, who maybe leads a bigger contingent. Now, there's obviously difficulties in list building with this because you can't take partials and there's no equipment at all. So if you're playing a 2,000 point game, my lists were coming up to 1960 because there's no way I can get any closer than that with the things that I own and want to run. They do give you an option that if you're 50 points or more under, you get an extra command point the very first round, which is okay, cool. That's fine. But that part of the list building is a little bit meh. But the way they actually put it together, I really do like. For the 5th one is priority and the underdog. So one of the biggest, people really like Age of Sigmar said they love this. I guess that's correct. I was never a big fan of it, is the priority roll. So at the end of the round, you roll for priority. You get to see who goes first. In a you go, I go game, when you look at Conquest, you're talking about 1 activation. There's potential ways it could be more than 1, but really 1 activation. That means I'm not having to wait long to do something if you won the roll. It doesn't mean it doesn't ever kind of affect the game greatly, but you don't get to do everything first. In this game, you do. Now, it's a more close combat game, and chargers don't get automatic strikes first, so it is a much more back and forth. You just get to swing first if you're the one whose turn it is. But there's been plenty of times when we've all seen someone goes second in a particular round, wins priority, goes first in the next round, and they shellac their opponent. They were in a very strong position. They got the option to go again from that very strong position, and they capitalize on it. So what they've done now for priority is that if you win the roll-off to determine who takes the next turn, and you just went, so if you were bottom of the round, you do the roll-off, you win, and now it's your choice, and you take top of the round, you cannot score your tactics. Tactics are 4 points every turn, and most missions kind of cap you on other stuff. This is overall a reasonably lower scoring game, much lower than 40K. You're looking at usually about 10 points a round. I think a lot of rounds are capped at around 6 to maybe 8, but you're looking at 10-ish or so. It might actually always be 10. Yeah, I just went through the plans. They are all capped at 10 total. 6 from objectives, 4 points from the battle tactic. Just one of the missions mentioned specifically 6 because the way they score it, you could go over. Some of the other ones only let you score up to 6, but that one, if that's a problem, they specifically say it. So I went second in the round. I won the roll off. If I take first turn, so if I am choosing my double turn on my opponent, then I don't get battle tactics. Now, if my opponent gives me the double turn, I can score whatever. That's fine. But if I choose it for myself, I don't get to do that. I don't think this is a huge deal in one-off games. Because if you're playing one-off, if I'm in a really good spot, I probably am okay with losing the battle tactic because going again might just win me the game. I do think this is much bigger for campaign or tournament play or competitive play. Reason being, if you double turn someone, now you might win, but your max score is 4 lower than it was before. So if we assume, yeah, let's assume a standard game, 5 rounds, that means 50 max points that you could get. You double turn once, you're now at 46. Maybe not too huge issue. You end up doing it twice, you're now at 42. One of the first tiebreakers after win-loss record is battle points, total points that you scored. So if you are trying to compete at the highest level, not allowing yourself to get those 4 points, if oh, I had to do it because otherwise I was absolutely going to lose. If it's not the case, you probably don't want to double turn someone because it could come back to haunt you, especially if you're talking about a, 5, 6 round tournament. It's a big thing. It's going to be very hard early to know if giving up that 4 points might actually make a really huge difference, especially in terms of cuts. But otherwise, even just in a standard gameplay, I think it makes a really big difference because there's a reason not to do it. Oh, I could take the double turn, but I'm going to score less. Our scores are pretty equal. And if I don't end up taking him out, if I don't destroy all the things I think I will, and there's always a chance you whiff and all of that, then he's going to really easily be able to outscore me. Those sort of thoughts come into play. So anything that lowers the desire to pure double turn is an improvement for this game. Last one that I want to mention in terms of the good is the objectives. I think the not the objectives, I should say. The actual missions using the objectives, let me put it that way. The missions, they did missions throughout the years. They took some of the previous ones. They now in the book, if you look at it, they tell you, hey, what's it look like if you want to make your own battlefield? What's it look like if you want to follow our terrain? And all of them have a twist. They have something, they have a way in which they score. They have a twist that usually says, hey, the underdog gets something. One thing I forgot to mention, in these missions, if you are currently in the current round, so if you have less victory points than your opponent, you're the underdog. Underdogs get an extra command point and they get some extra abilities. So depending on the mission, they might be the ones who, we're determining which one's the primary objective. Maybe I make you re-roll it because I'm the underdog. Or maybe I get some other sort of bonus. One of them, you get extras if you charge in that round. I forget what it was that you got extra. Oh yeah, add 1 to hit rolls if they charged and the objective is in the opponent's territory. Stuff like that. So they're giving you catch-up mechanics. If you're losing, you get a little bit something extra to help make up that difference. And your opponent is less incentivized to, if they're maybe in a good spot, to shellac you again by double turning. So all of those are pluses. So if you just want to hear the nice stuff, you're good. If you want to hear the bad things, 2 bad things. One, and this is not a change, the way in which they do wounds is just annoying. Most games you count, depending on the type of game, games can either be count down or count up. This is counting up your wounds, not counting down your health. So Conquest does it a little bit different, and there I'm fine with it because everything is like, or maybe some other people do it, but there I usually tend to count up my wounds. But I don't have a wide variety in the amount of them. Most of my stuff is 4 wounds, and monsters, that's a separate thing, of course. In this one, though, the way they do the bracketing, they count number of wounds that you've taken, not wounds that you have remaining. What's tough about that is, that means as your opponent, I may not have any idea how injured the thing really is. Oh, it has 5 wounds on it. Okay, is that like half? Is that good? So I prefer more of a counting down for games when things vary wildly in terms of wounds, or they don't have some other very clear, nice delineation. And we're talking about a game that might have a good amount of units. So that's a little bit of a minor gripe, nothing too big. The biggest gripe, and what I think could become a problem for this, and is to an extent a problem, free endless spells and terrain. So if your faction has a terrain piece, you get it for free. And in actuality, it'd be kind of dumb not to bring it. Now, some of them are definitely better than others. So I know the lodestone from Beastman, it adds to, I want to say it's to the rend in like a pretty big bubble, like an 18-inch bubble, or maybe even better. Or it might be a 24-inch bubble, and if you're near the middle of the field, then it's everywhere on the board. Ours, our Bone Tithe Nexus is, hey, on a 4-up, if you make that roll, you get to pick 1 unit, you get to do something cool, but you could miss the roll, multiple times and not really do much. So no matter what, they're good. They're very unequal in power. Some are obviously better than others. Maybe we'll do some tier lists related to those sort of things if there's interest in that. Especially if there's interest in Sigmar stuff, let me know, because I play it, go over it, stuff like that, and hopefully be able to get down on for some of it too once things have calmed down his house a little bit. But or any of the other locals or guys I know, if they want to, they're more than welcome to come on and talk about it. But none of them are bad, or even if they're not good, they're free. So like, why wouldn't you? Which means, well, do you happen to own it? Because if not, now you have that. Now you could proxy something yourself, of course, but if it's official, let's say if it's an official event, that might be a little bit more dicey. You'd have to at least make sure the size is correct. I know at least for the Bone-Tide Nexus, I know the thing is huge. So like not using the real thing will be a little bit tough. There's options, of course, but that's something you have to think about now. The other thing is the free endless spells. There's no reason not to bring endless spells. They're free. Bring one. Remember, endless spells are done by essentially a grouping. So you might have one in your faction, and then there's a bunch of general ones. There's a lot of them actually in the book. They're manifestation lores, I should say. Like one of them's forbidden power. Okay, hey, it gives you those 4 different things in there. So if you take forbidden power, you got those 4 things that you can summon. You summon them in your hero phase in place of usually a spell or maybe a prayer. They have ways to be dispelled. They have different abilities they do all of that. Keep in mind, one of the reactive abilities you can use in your opponent's turn is to let you cast a spell. And manifestation lores, or spell or prayer, manifestations are that, which means I have options of casting my opponent's phase as well. So I have options to put them down on my turn. I have options to put them in your turn. If you happen to get rid of one, so if you want to actually spend one of your, essentially dispels to get rid of it, because you don't dispel it then, you dispel it later, and your turn essentially, which means if I summon it in your turn, you're kind of screwed. It's there. But that means that now, if there's some that are very good, and there are many that are better than others. There's some that are honest. I was going through it to figure out which ones I liked. I like the one we have for our faction. I think they're actually pretty good. They do things like remove ward saves or lower ward saves and things like that. They're actually pretty nice. But there's some other ones that are like downright bad and some that are really, really good. The Cronus Spine Incarnate, which was the giant whirling set of bones from last year or so, that is a manifestation destroyer. That's its goal. It goes and hunts them down. It gets more on the charge against them, gets to go after them more, all these sorts of cool bonuses. So if that becomes a problem, that's a really good one to have. If not, there's other ones that are really good. I think it was Gravetide. That's a really super strong one. I think that might have been it. I don't remember. Suffocating Gravetide. Another one that's really, really strong, and anyone can take it. Well, if endless spells are free, so you get to pick one manifestation lore, then if they're not all equal, then you're going to see which ones are best. Again, if you're playing for fun, bring whatever you got. But when you start boiling down to people looking at it and saying like, hey, what's a good decision? Some of these ones you would actively be hurting yourself to take. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And God knows I play stuff at times because it's cool and fun. But then there is always that little spot of like, oh, well, that thing is, it does just really work well with my army. It does synergize better. Why wouldn't I do that? Oh, wait, it kind of works really well with most people or a lot of people's. And if you happen to play any bit of competitive, there's certain ones you're going to see and other ones you will not see whatsoever. I think they used to have points, and the problem is without points, if you don't balance it right, then there's obvious choices and non-obvious choices. Again, you can always choose whatever you want, but if something stands up and says, hey, this is super great and the one you're picking is bad, that can be tough. So I think endless spells need to have a points cost. Or maybe a bit of a rework for some of them, or maybe a little bit of a rework of how they do it. This is something they want. The other problem with it, obviously, is, do you have them? I ordered mine. I don't have them yet because people order them all over the place. They're actually really hard to get. Some of them I know you just can't find. You can find stand-ins and stuff like that, of course. But again, if you want the actual models, Some of them are good, some of them not quite so much by the look. But if you want the actual models, it could actually be really tough to get them. And that's just kind of a feels bad, I think, in general. So almost everything about this new edition, I am very positive on. We should be getting you some battle reports, hopefully in the not too distant future. I kind of want to get myself painted first, but I'm currently working on that. That's going to be one of the big projects this week, is to try to get that painted, or at least almost all painted. We'll see exactly how far we get with that. But that was 6 good things, 1/2 bad things for this new edition. Let me know if you're listening on a podcatcher. You can head over to YouTube, or if you're watching us on YouTube, let me know in comments below. Are you playing the new edition of Sigmar? Are you looking forward to it? What do you think? What do you think is the best, the worst, anything like that? I know it's pretty new, but this is the most exciting time in a game, is when people are still messing around with it, trying to figure it out and seeing what they like and what they don't like. Especially when we look at, it can be tough when a game is solved, and I don't want this game to get solved. I don't want any games to really get solved. So I'm hoping that some of these, say, endless spells that don't feel quite as good, or manifestation lords that don't feel quite as good, maybe there is some really good options for them. Maybe they work in ways that we haven't thought of yet, or haven't come up with yet. I know, at least by looking around, there's some consensus on the fact that some are better than others, but maybe there's some options that we just haven't seen yet. Maybe there's going to be some really cool list ideas that people are going to come up with that are really going to change what we do. What's great is it's so new that there's no reason to discuss meta. It's too early to know pure meta. You can know some stuff that's good or bad, like Nagash is amazing. You don't need a meta discussion to tell how good he is. But other things, like other lists, no, we gotta wait on that. All right, for other things you will be seeing somewhat soon, you should be seeing some stuff about the army that I'm painting. I'm currently making a work in progress video. I'm going to hopefully have some more progress done before I show that off, but we're going to work on that. For Sigmar stuff, I do want to do some other things, especially with Dan. I know he has interest in doing it. He's obviously a little preoccupied right now. But if you're interested in hearing anything, let us know. Say what you want to hear. Tell us all about it, and we can record about it. I said there's a few other things I have planned, and you should see them coming up fairly soon. All right. On behalf of everyone here then at the show, have some good hobbying. It's a great gaming.